Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. We appreciate you tuning in today, and we're actually filming our show a little bit earlier on this Wednesday. You are viewing at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's the time that we air every single Wednesday. But this Wednesday is a day where we are paying our respects. We talked about Michael Thomas Sr., and today is the day that he is being laid to rest. So we want to just acknowledge once again just a great man, a person who gave his life to advocating for others. And as his family mourns during this time, we want to just celebrate his life once again and the impact that he had in the young lives that he touched. May they remember it by how they live, and that his family could find some sort of comfort in knowing that his work was not in vain. So, gentlemen, you want to say any words before we move on to acknowledge some other ancestors who have recently transitioned?
Well, before we acknowledge anyone else, I'll just add to what you've said. I mean, that picture right there, look at that. I mean, that's a smooth brother right there. You know what I'm saying? We often talk about, the person when they pass, and what we really should talk about how the person made you feel when they were around, because that feeling never goes away. That feeling stays with you whenever you think about that person. And when I think about Mike, and I've seen him, he's attended with me many of the workshops and many of the protests, you know, that's how he looks sometimes. Just fantabulous. You know what I'm saying? A brother Virgil, who we're going to talk about in a second, saw this picture. He'd be like, yeah, my man got it all together. He got the polka dot, he got the sky blue, the shades are rocking. We all right. And the waves that make me seasick right now. I don't even know how the dove is flying right now. The waves are making me seasick, So God bless. We'll pay our respects. And I hope there's somebody. We always talk about a succession plan. I wonder who is going to fill that seat. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be the next one? That's what life is all about. So interesting times to come. Ed?
Well, if history is a lesson, there's inevitably going to be an incident that someone is going to gravitate to in that community and hopefully rise to the occasion. It inevitably happens. Hope springs eternal. There'll be another warrior to come.
You know what? Give me the address to Hope. I want to talk to Hope. I got to ring Hope doorbell. Her and I, we got to speak for a minute. You know what I'm saying?
It's a private address. Ed and I have that address.
Yeah, I see. You know what I mean? She sent me the P.O. box. I'm like, yo, Hope, you got my letter? Like the P.O. box.
Listen, the reason why I say that really is in my own personal life. My experience has been that you'll be standing there and something will happen and you'll get swept up in it. And next thing you know, somebody that was standing on the sidelines turns into an activist all of a sudden.
That is true.
Yeah. And they're called upon and God calls upon you at times and says, hey, listen, what you going to do? And you do, and you move forward.
And that he did. And we definitely celebrate him as we celebrate another ancestor who has transitioned, golf pioneer Lee Elder. He broke the race barrier at the Masters. He died at the ripe old age of 87. I'm sure
easy when you say the ripe old age. Folks are living nowadays. You know what I mean? We got 102. Because we living right. Are we not living right, folks? We living right now, right?
Yeah.
That's right. So he went to 87. When all this nutrition and all these things weren't at the height of where it is, and being a vegan or being a pescatarian and running every 5 miles, doing all the things that we do nowadays. And we know life expectancy, is moving in an upward trajectory. So here we are. I think the title in and of itself speaks volumes. I don't know if there's much that could be said. Except for what he has experienced while doing that. We always hear about Bill Russell and what he experienced, and Jackie Robinson and what they experienced when they played in the NBA for Bill Russell and Jackie Robinson in the Major League Baseball, and how they were segregated, how they were spat upon, how they were treated. You got to do that like 3.0 when it comes down to the Masters.
But I think I agree with the 3.0 because I think it's especially significant because sports like golf and tennis are really considered those country club, very elite sports that only even amongst whites, you have kind of that upper class that plays these sports. With golf, you have, it's only played in certain places, and you need the clubs and so forth, and you need to be part of the member or whatever, or be able to pay whatever fee you need to pay in order to, get on that course. And then, and same thing with tennis. And so, for several reasons, even after the breaking of the color barrier in baseball and the baseball, basketball, football, the three major sports, these sports like golf and tennis, even to this day, continue to remain very, very white. And you only see a few brothers and sisters playing those sports.
And very, very isolated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Isolated, right? So you got a team around you when you're playing NBA or you playing with Major League. And your teammates might protect you a little bit, right? Because they know they need you. They need you on the court. They need you on the baseball field. So we're going to show up for you a little bit. We ain't going to show up too much that KKK is burning across on my house, but we're going to show up just enough that you can appreciate because I need you on the court. Here, you are isolated totally, and nobody's showing up for you at all. And the barriers of entry, which is economic, unlike the other sports, if you're a caddy, that's how most people learned how to play golf, right? They're the black boy or the black girl pushing the cart around, carrying the clubs, and maybe at night they get a chance to practice a little bit or get a swing or learn the game. It's very isolating. Very isolating.
Back to Hope Springs Eternal as a new golfer. There's still barriers to break, even for women and Black women in particular. And there's a lot of exposure. And I'm a part of a couple of those golf groups that are giving access because it is an exclusive opportunity. Not everyone can afford to purchase clubs and to go to these houses, clubhouses and participate in these fundraiser events that are at a ticketed price that not everybody has access to. So the fact that he was able to break the color barrier, bringing that conversation back around to where the state of the sport is now and what has and hasn't changed, I think is appropriate in the era that we're living in. And for all that he went through in his life and all that he endured, some of which will never be written in the papers, we want to thank Lee Elder for opening up and breaking that barrier because the deals are really made on the course. And I'm seeing that as a newer golfer. I can only imagine all of what has transpired, over the years, and knowing some of the associations that have sprouted up and Black golfers associations that have a unique perspective on what this sport, particularly in business, has been able to do. So to his family and to those who played with him, worked with him, maybe even learned from him, we send our love.
And make sure we got to mark this down, as Dr. Grant said, put a pin in it. This is a teachable moment. We got to step up our economic game because Dr. Grant is now golfing, and we know the barriers, the financial barriers to do that. So we got to get a couple of more cases out here. We got to do settle some more matters.
Yeah, get it on some of those deals.
We got to entertain something going on here, bro. Because clearly, you sitting here and I'm sitting here, and she getting ready to break out to go do her tea time. You know what I'm saying? So
I mean, moving on. We also want to acknowledge that we have an artistic director who has transitioned. Mr. Russell mentioned him as we were talking about how dapper Michael's picture was on his celebration of life. And Virgil was someone who is well known in the industry, and he was young, 41. And
yes,
that cancer, every time we hear about cancer, it's just like, oh, could we find a way to just not deal with this anymore? So we want to send our condolences to everyone in the industry, as well as those who were impacted and influenced by the brilliance that he shared with the world.
Oh, look at the photo right there. If you come back, look at that right there. Look at them. Look at the frames on that. Look at the frames he got.
I knew you were going to talk about the
like
frames.
that brother is like the beard is to die for. And then he got the frames on. I mean, like, and the polka dot or going to, like, come on, that green, that red, that's some serious.
Are those polka dots or buttons?
Those are buttons.
Oh, those are buttons? Oh, that's even more creative. You know what I mean? Right?
Yeah, I knew you would catch that.
That's nice.
He was in a class all of himself. I was going to see if there were any other pictures.
No, it's just like we talked about earlier about exclusivity. You know, what made Virgil Abloh special was he's one of the few black men that are allowed to operate in that elite fashion world. You don't see many of us in there, and so you know he was an icon. He was someone in a very powerful position to dictate, you know, fashion. So you know this is a terrible loss for the community, because you know, of course, you know, black people buy clothes. They buy a lot of clothes. That's, you know, most black people that you know love fashion. In fact, I learned this news from my son, who learned about it before I did and sent me a text saying, "Hey, did you hear about Virgil Abloh?" And I was like, "Wow!" And to die so young.
We know your son is ahead of the curve when it comes down.
He's
putting you on. He's putting you on. That's great. That's good.
Yeah.
He was a devoted father, husband, son, brother. I mean, you know, there are a lot of people personally in his life who are mourning, and then publicly, you know, because of what he was able to provide. So
I think he was either Ghanaian or Nigerian. I know he was.
Yeah, you know what? I was about to say that. I believe it's from that because I'm looking at the buttons, right? The colors are symbolic, right? You know what I mean? You just ain't throwing buttons on there just to throw buttons on there, right? You got the yellow, you got the red, you got the green. Like, you know, maybe I'm reading into it, but if we had an interview, I'm sure they stand for something.
No. I mean, you've been in recent years, you've been seeing an African influence on this, you know, otherwise European fashion. So, you know, from this show's cultural perspective, I think that's the main reason why we're spending some time talking about this and Virgil Abloh's contribution. There's some, you know, rumors out there that Kanye is going to be trying to step into that role. We'll see.
Yeah, we're going to see what Kanye come up. One long sleeve, one short sleeve shirt. We're going to check it out. You be the first one to get that one. You be the first one to get that one. You know what I mean?
You know? Moving on with the rest of the rest in power.
Look, my comment is, in that picture that you just saw of Virgil with his hand over his face, is just appropriate. He's like, you know, right now his spirits are saying, "What? Kanye is going to take care of what?" Yo.
Moving on, and as we always pay tribute to our ancestors, no matter what point they are in age, their impact is still something that stays with us. So rest in power as we move on to now what this show is about, Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. We have some DAs and DA situations in the news. So we're going to start first with sort of a follow-up to what we've been talking about following the Ahmaud Arbery case. And there's some breaking news, so to speak, that's happening here with the former DA accused of showing favor.
Yeah, Jackie Johnson was the DA of the county where Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, and his murderers were recently found guilty at the end of a trial. She's been arrested, and why is she being arrested? Violating her oath of office, obstruction, hindering prosecution. If many of you in the audience will recall, this was the rest of these individuals were delayed by approximately 2 months after Ahmaud had been killed. And why was that? Because when, you know, his death was reported, the district attorney, I believe, of Glenn County at the time, Jackie Johnson, would not prosecute, and then a neighboring prosecutor, I believe in a county called Waycross, said, "Oh well, these individuals were trying to perform a citizen's arrest, and nobody was charging these individuals, and they just sat on it until finally the activists got, I believe, the Georgia Attorney General to take a closer look, and then at some point, the DA recused herself because of her relationship with McMichael, one of the murderers, who was a former law enforcement officer. So now I'm happy to see that the authorities are now arresting her and holding her accountable for her actions by omission. DAs have a duty when they see that the law has been violated to prosecute without fear nor favor. And that's not what happened here, of course, as this article highlights. Former DA accused of showing favor to McMichaels. And you're not supposed to do that. She was supposed to look at the facts and say, wait a minute, hold on. You guys violated the law. I don't care if you're a former law enforcement. I don't care if we work together. The law has to be enforced. And that's not what she did. And now she's being held accountable. And hopefully, she does time for this, or she gets hers here.
There's a couple of things I can say about this article and the reality of what is taking place. And so I will. That's why we have this platform. One is kudos to the media to making sure that they follow this story, because this can easily be swept under the rug. It happens, she's penalized, and nobody really knows about it. And instead of us spending time on some other frivolous litigation that's going on in the media, maybe the TV networks that cover trials on a daily basis, maybe they can cover this trial, cover what's going on here, because we're spending a lot of time covering other trials that are somewhat meaningless to a degree and really don't speak to racism in America, nepotism, and a bunch of other isms in America that affect brown and black people daily. So that's one. So hats off to them. Two, I don't know if we have a picture of Jackie Johnson, but from a cultural perspective, you hear Jackie Johnson, you think that's a person of color. Not a person of color. This is a white woman who decided to protect her friend, George McMichaels, who former law enforcement, which highlights another point. If you're doing some critical thinking, just off course, I digress. You see all these master classes out here. And I just saw the other day a master class, Cornell West, critical thinking. Well, we've been conducting master classes for a long time on Speaking Legally. And one of the master classes is critical thinking. What is not said, that's what you should be looking at, right? And what is not said is that favor to McMichaels. What is not said is that, as Ed pointed out, George McMichaels, former law enforcement, which raises the other issue that we have brought forth on this platform, is the interwoven relationship between police and the district attorney's office, and how that becomes convoluted, how that becomes very complex when you're trying to prosecute a police officer. Yes, he was not active. He is former, but you still have the same conflict. You still have the same, well, I don't know if I really want to do that. And her oath says that she cannot show favor and affections. And she did both. She showed favor and she had affection towards the McMichael in a way that she tried to hide and not arrest the son. I forgot his name. I think his name is Travis McMichael. And so we see it live, real time. And there's been a movement. There's been a movement. There you go. There's been a movement in at least New York City or the state of New York to hold prosecutors more accountable, to be able to file grievances against them for prosecutorial misconduct, holding back Brady material. That is material that goes to the defense counsel that can exculpate the client, right, from liability. Maybe show information that's in the client's benefit. So prosecutors keep from bringing that forward so they can win their case. Prosecutorial misconduct. This is of the same ilk. On the federal level, they have, I think, a statute, 18 U.S.C. 1001, obstructing of governmental justice, obstructing an investigation. You lie, you send us on a false lead, we got you. and she did all of it right here.
Well, what's egregious, from my understanding, McMichaels actually called her right after the killing to say, hey, this and this happened. I need to speak to you, or just called her to say, hey, listen, I need to talk to you about something. He had her direct line. I mean,
access.
This is egregious.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm not going for McMichael or anybody in the world to have someone who's in a position of power telephone number. That means you've been riding and dying with them when they didn't have that power. And so, granted, he has access. We need to have more access. And the way you have more access is, once again, we go back to knowing who you vote for, putting people in color in positions, all those things that we talk about over and over and over and over, like, scratching a record on a DJ. You know what I mean?
Listen, the expectation itself is frightening in terms of his expectation that he was going to call her and prevent.
Hey, look.
That's
wild. That's like the
wait. Look, I'm gonna say what you guys say. He thought spring was internal, or hope was internal. I'm gonna make this call. And she got me. Spring is internal, hope is internal, somebody's internal, but I got this telephone number and I'm gonna make it happen. I mean, look, I don't want to spend the show on him, but he would be a fool not to use that number. I mean,
he was supposed to call Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
That's what you call it. That's what you call John Travolta calls his drug dealer, says, hey, she overdosed. I'll bring it over to you. He's like,
that's right.
Call me, lose my number. That's what he should have done.
Right. That's right.
Well,
if that is not an admission of guilt, you gonna call the DA after you done did something?
Yeah.
What is?
Listen.
Well, what I'm curious,
I'm not going to call any of my DA friends.
Well, look, I'm really curious to see what actually happened. So we know that this is being investigated, but what's really going to happen? I'm curious about that. But we have some other DA situations going on when we talk about who is doing what. We have folks that are leaving the DA's office in New York.
Dr. Grant, let me, before you introduce this, I want to make sure your point, right? The point is that what will happen to her? Will she lose her license, not just her job? Some critical things should happen, because in my experience, I've seen other lawyers do less and get penalized more. So you're right. We got to stay on top of that. And for every action, there's a reaction. We always say that. And no action is an action. And that's what she did. She did not act. And that was an action in and of itself. But it appears in the Bronx, there's a lot of no action too, because people are breaking out. They're resigning.
What's going on? The numbers say 88 attorneys have resigned from the Bronx DA's office. That's up from 58 last year and 62. What's going on?
I mean, from what I understand in terms of the reports here, the DA herself, DA Clark, seems to be linking this to funding and resources, and her being able to pay her ADAs a certain amount to keep them.
I made $32,000 when I first started. That's part of the gig. That is part of the gig. I read the article. I get it. I'm not faulting DA Clark for saying what she said, but that's part of the gig. They've said that, the reason why DAs are leaving is because they have to abide by the new discovery reform, where discovery has to be handed over 15 days after you are arrested and you put through the system. Come on, man, give me a break, man. So what other requirement? Because now you got to live in the 5 boroughs. That's another requirement. These requirements always existed. This is part of practicing law. This is what happens when you were a defense counsel in Milwaukee, Ed, right? And there was rules and regulations you had to live by. You know what I mean? Regulations I had to live by.
To be honest with you, in terms of that discovery issue, I really see that more as the DA's offices have to increase their staff of paralegals and administrative staff. I mean, of course, the ADAs have to review what's about to be turned over, but that seems more of an administrative load than anything else. And so I'm kind of hesitant when I hear this issue of DAs leaving being interwoven with
Well,
the new discovery. I
well,
mean, at the end of the day,
that's
it's kind of
exactly
like,
that's exactly what we speak to, right? When we talk about what is not said and the critical thinking going into this, right? If you have a deadline and you don't control the deadline, right? Because the discovery comes from the police department, right? It comes from someplace else, right? That's making you leave your gig. I mean, it's cited in the article. You talk about lower salaries. I see that. We always know that the salaries are low. It's not 32 G's like back in the day.
Yeah,
right?
And what they're doing is here, the truth of the matter is that all of the DA's offices have these same challenges.
Exactly.
For some reason, the Bronx County DA's office has an inordinate amount of DAs leaving. So is it the salary, is it funding, or is it lending to something else in terms of the atmosphere within the office?
Well, the numbers read, to your point, and the numbers read in Manhattan, 83 resigned compared to 78 the year before. No big deal. 5 people one way or the other, right? 74 resigned in Brooklyn, slightly improvement from 83. So you clap for Gonzalez. He retained some more people. In Queens, it went from 48, and it was like previously I think 40 or 34. Oh, it was 42 the year, so it went from 48 to 40, up from 42. Those are small numbers. That happens all the time. This is a drastic number, and let's understand it's happening at a time that people are not even showing up to court in person. It's not like you got less of a responsibility. You're not even showing up in court in person, and so now you're coming back to in person. The market is not ready for everyone that's coming back in person, and so therefore there's a fluttering of jobs that are out there. The market is either stay stagnant or gotten worse.
And I'll be honest with you too. The positions at the DA's office, in terms of entry level, are quite coveted. Most law school graduates want to work at DA's offices because of the amount of experience that you obtain in these offices in terms of litigation experience. The question then becomes later on whether or not you are able to retain senior level experienced ADAs, but then at that point, that becomes more of an issue of what type of atmosphere you're creating for them, exactly. Whether they feel like there's room for promotion, growth.
Look, man. Look, I was a DA in the Bronx, right? And I'm gonna do all fairness to the numbers, right? 88. Last year was 58. And the year before was 62. So the numbers are going, they spike it, right? So here it is. You knew you were going to get paid less, right? But you had little perks here and there that you kind of work with, right? I always say working for government in DC always means a whole lot more than working for government in New York. We all get that feeling, at least I do. You're revered. You're like, yo, you got a good job. You're doing the right thing. But when you're in a community where the relationship between police and the community is not well, and prosecutions involving that don't ever fall into the community's favor, the community wants to be protected, and a majority of the prosecutors that are prosecuting, and everybody deserves a job, don't get me wrong, and I would say not even a job, a career, because if you look at it as a job, maybe that's part of the problem, is looked at as a job instead of a career. They're not from the community. They don't necessarily have to be Bronx, but they're not brown and black folks that are able to use the culturalism and use what they bring to the table to have people have faith in them as to what may have happened and what may not have happened, and that they're being forthright and transparent. And then you go into leadership. That's what it all boils down to. I remember DAs, unfortunately, when Clark first became DA, they were leaving to go from one DA's office to Bronx to go to Brooklyn. You never did that. You never went from one DA's office to another DA. That was taboo. It was like, yo, you ride and die with who you got drafted with. You know what I mean? They did a LeBron move. Like, you do a Kobe move. You got drafted with the Lakers. You stay with the Lakers. You don't go somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Everything with basketball.
One of those deals. But you get my point. You stay there. You work there. You don't go and then go to the next DA's office. That was just something that you did.
If you're going to leave, you go to the private sector.
Without a question, brother. Without a question.
Well, interesting, because there's still more on the DA. I'll let you finish your comments on this, because then we have some stuff going on in Nassau County. I mean, this must be a DA conversation.
Women are ruling the world, and we see that, people make a lot of things about gender, right? And I think what we see here, people are people, no matter what the gender is. So we got a DA in Georgia who just deserves what is going to come her way, right? Just by her actions. We got a DA in the Bronx who I believe is still figuring it out, second term, still trying to get it together, and that'll shape form. And then we got Joyce Smith, which, we all want to give a round of applause to, who is the acting district attorney in Nassau County, who says enough is enough. Like we not even playing this game no more. That's it.
And by the way, she's the acting DA. She's a woman of color. She became the DA, I think, back in June, because the elected DA Madeline Singas took a position as a judge on the Court of Appeals, which is, of course, quite prominent. Arguably not as powerful as the DA of Nassau County, but nonetheless prestigious in terms of the legal profession. So here she is, and she appears to be taking a closer look at some of the practices of her office, and applause and much kudos. She took the opportunity with her power to examine what was going on with these felony arrests of people who happen to be driving with what are like paper
temporary plates.
Temporary plates.
Yeah.
Nassau County Police are arresting an inordinate amount of people of color, Black and Latino, on Long Island for these violations that comparatively in other counties throughout the state usually get like a ticket, or at the very least a misdemeanor. Here they're charging people with felony forged instrument possession, and charging them with this. They're having to spend the night in jail. Many of them pleading guilty to get out. I mean, just bad.
Yeah, you're talking about the worst of implementation of a policy that is on the books that may have some good use, right?
Yeah, and when you read this article, it reeks of racism, because you don't hear anything about the Nassau County Police investigating the dealerships
right
in Long Island, which I would imagine are not owned by people of color, right?
And there's no, you don't hear anything about any business citations, any civil on that. And so, to your point, one, people of color, as we always say, who are in power, are looking at things from a cultural lens, and looking at the disparities, and looking at racism, and looking at the classism of it, the classism too, right? Of what's going on, right? And who is being affected, and the implementation. We have a mayor that's about to come into office, Eric Adams. Once again, kudos to him. And he is talking about bringing back stop and frisk, right? Which, if implemented in a way that is balanced and effective, no community want their community crime written, can be a very powerful thing. The problem is that it's not implemented in the fashion for which it's designed, just like here, the temporary plates, the writing of the ticket of the temporary plate. There's a summons. All right, you get that. That doesn't lead to pull your car over, step out of the car, I smell marijuana, and now I'm in the trunk of your car, and I may find something illegal, or now all of a sudden you got to go to the grand jury. You go into the grand jury because you went to the dealership and they said, put this on and we're going to do the paperwork, and it should be ready in 3 days or 4 days or 2 weeks or what have you. And then now you're getting pulled over. And, look, we can go even further. There is a law in the vehicle traffic violation in the criminal penal code that talks about not having any covering on your license. Talks about even if you have, the signage that says bought my Honda from whatever, and that's covering part of your license plate, a little bit of the A, a little bit of the number, whatever it is, you can get pulled over and get a ticket for that, because I've tried many of cases where that was the probable cause, that was the reason for the stop, because something was covering the plate, and you see that covering is directly from the dealership, like it says buy from Honda. Like, this.
I think the big issue here is it wasn't even all of that other stuff. It
was
I know about the plate. Like, why are people ending up with felonies on a plate that they got from the dealership? Yes, there's a certain aspect to this story about during the pandemic with the closure of the DMV office and people having to rely on this and the increase of people buying vehicles in order not to ride public transportation.
How about that other aspect?
Let me finish. And there being certain individuals who taking advantage of that and selling false plates online. You know, at the end of the day, you know, it's like, listen, you stop someone for a plate that for what's essentially a traffic violation. We're not talking about violence. We're not talking about drugs. We're not talking about none of that. Jail, overnight, felony. Wow, that's like
crazy.
Wow.
It's
crazy. And it's resources too.
Stop right there.
I don't need you to be spending your time on that.
No, Ed, you got it right there. Stop right there. That's the critical thinking in the underlying what is not being said here. We're in a pandemic. Arrests are down. Overtime is down. Oh, snap, yo. Oh, snap. Overtime is down for certain officers. That's right. Drop the bomb on it. That's a bomb, baby. That's like, boom. That's drop the bomb.
Baby.
Overtime is down. So now if I stop you for this violation, misdemeanor, and I create it and make it a felony, then I got to process you. That means I can't process you and then go home. I got to stay with you. So then maybe I get a little bit more overtime in a time where nobody's out in the streets because we're during the pandemic and you're not making nearly as much arrests. Come on now. We in church. Let's go. Let's go. Right? Let's go. Now I'm making these arrests and maybe I'm padding, right? Because the overtime is not there. Wink, wink, wink. I'm suggesting there's heavily padding. Wink, wink, wink. I'm suggesting that this article doesn't speak to that. Wink, wink, wink. Yo, what's going on here? That's part of this. That's part of this equation. We always talk about this in cardiac arrest. It ain't race. That's only skin deep. Go deeper. Go down.
What are we talking about?
Economics, baby. The ecosystem, economics.
Yeah, this is wow. And that's what I said when I heard about the article. I was like, wait, what? People were getting felonies because of what they received from a dealership. Like, it just doesn't even make sense. It seems like it's false, like we're making this up, but we're not. And you know, thanks to the DA, and let's shout her out again. She's the acting DA in Nassau, but it's significant, and she has a very wide and deep background, and I'm interested to see just how much she will be able to continue to look at, overturn in her, I guess, I don't know the duration left in her acting term, but maybe she might desire to go ahead and run for the office. But it's
we need to vote for her. We need to vote for her. And these are the
circling right back.
That's right. These are the tea leaves of the Ken Thompson type of thinking about how we do what we do in these type of positions.
Yeah, because Ken Thompson was the pioneer in examining what was happening with these arrests for low-level offenses and the Kings County DA's office prosecuting them, and him saying, no, I'm not going to continue to do that. You know, I'm not going to continue, you know, and also examining too the ordinance violation tickets that people were receiving, say, for loitering and stuff, and then they would go up, and then there would be a warrant issued for the person's arrest for what started out as a ticket. So now resources being spent on
once again finances
individuals instead of just simply saying, hey, listen, you didn't show up for this ticket. Here's a second shot. Make sure you get there. Things that should be happening that are not, that are being used to economically support a corrupt system on the blacks of people of color, and people of color being elected to powerful positions to examine these practices and eliminate them. And that's
we need all the DAs to stand up. Like you can't have Nassau standing up and Bronx sitting down. It just harkened back when we were looking for leadership from that office in reference when George Floyd happened. Like, we looking for a DA. The DAs was looking for a DA to say, like, hey, look, I'm not for that. And until we have people standing up in that way, we're going to have problems. We're always going to have problems.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it just, once again, driving it home. We've been talking about it here on the show over and over again. Being involved, get engaged. This is how we uncover what's going on. This is how we put people in office who are really going to represent the needs of the community that they serve. People who look like the community that they serve, that understand, that have been through. You can have a certain level of empathy, and we've had people do great jobs, but this is another example of how quickly, I mean, it was just June that she had to step into the role, and she's already hit the ground running, doing what needs to be done to look at the disparities that are in our criminal justice system. So as we close out the DA conversation, we're not going to go deep into this next one. We're just going to kind of tee it up for next week, because we do have some other articles that we do want to discuss. But moving from Nassau, now we're heading over to the Republic of Brooklyn.
Yeah, we gotta.
That's on you, Ed. That's on you, Ed. That's on you, Ed. Right.
Well, we're gonna look at discovery. Meaning the turning over of documents at the beginning of the criminal case, and what's happening in Brooklyn with that. And so we're gonna really delve into that and educate our audience as to that, and what the latest status quo is on that.
And the reason why I point for our viewers to Ed, because Ed was one of the what they call the suits. He was the executive powers to be in Brooklyn, and being a man of the community and seeing the vision of what was going down. He took off his tie and took off his shirt, and here he is right now, straight down the way, got the office, slid in. It was like, I'm done. So. Kudos to my man Easy for taking the hard way, right? Because you could easily just stay there, right, and just dot the I's and cross the T's, but taking the hard way, because it's hard out here representing you folks, and I ain't going to shy away from it. I ain't going to shy away from it at all. But we do what we do because we love the community and we love you. So that's that. And I can't wait till we get into this next week.
Yes, so we will talk about that, and that's why the two of you here as legal experts, this is what you do. You're on the ground. This is your passion. You didn't have to choose this road, but you've chosen this road because you know about the inequities, you know about the disparities, and you live this out each and every day. So it's not just pontificating on a show. This is the work that you've committed to and that you've given your life to. So we thank you for that. As we move into the importance of education, we have a lot that has been happening across the board in this pandemic world that we're living in, virtual school, hybrid school, and back at school, and all the challenges that go with it. And I want to start off with just congratulating a friend of mine, the current city chancellor, Misha Porter, who will end and step down at the end of the year. She's going to lead the Bronx Community Foundation as the transition happens with the Eric Adams administration. She is someone that I can say personally, I know how committed she is to children and to the education of children. She did her best coming in to this role and keeping it moving in a pandemic. And, you're going to make decisions. Some will be popular, some won't be. But as an African-American woman, to be able to take this role and to step in the role and to execute the way she did, I want to say shout out to my girl, Misha, and excited for what her leadership will continue to bring to the borough of the Bronx that we both share an affinity for, and the foundation work that I know will be better off because Misha is there. So Gentlemen, I don't know if you had a chance to meet Chancellor Porter in her time serving, but if you want to share a few words before we give the breaking news of who that replacement is uh, going to be.
Well, I'm gonna ask Chancellor Porter because she's still the chancellor right now to save a little spot for me when she makes her transition because we need to meet up. Because if you're talking about serving the Bronx in the way that I think you are, I think that there's some synergies. And Dr. Grant, you'll take that from me. You'll make that happen. But what I will say for her and her legacy is that you 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 were appointed or you were put in this position and you did what you thought was right. And that's all we can ask is you do what you think is right. And you don't be shameful or slight or humble about it. You go in there with an agenda and you shake it up and you do what you need to do because you have the information, you have the power, and this is the right thing to do. And we're going to trust in you because we know the cloth from which you made. And no matter where you go, and whether it's this position and whether it's the next position, and I say that for you, and I say that for anybody else that becomes chancellor. We trust in you, and that's good, and that's why you in the place that you are, and you're going to do the things that you do.
Was she the first woman of color to hold the school chancellor position?
Far as yes, I believe so.
I mean, when she was appointed, I was elated because I wasn't used to seeing a woman of color being placed in such a powerful position, despite the overwhelming number of women who serve as teachers in the educational system. So it was pleasant to hear of her appointment, and I pretty much liked the job that she did, especially under the challenging circumstances that she was confronted with during a pandemic and having to support a outside of the classroom learning system and helping transition these young people back into an in-person, and then dealing with staff who, a good number weren't, were opposed to getting vaccinated, or otherwise complying with the protocols that were put forth in the mandates. So, I got to say that sister definitely, showed what she was made of during this. And I hope that she set the standard and broke the ceiling for other women of color to hold this position in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the good news is she's also a friend of who is the top candidate. She's actually mentored by him for New York City during her tenure, I should say, back in her school as a principal in the Bronx, et cetera, even before becoming a principal. David Banks is the top candidate to run the largest school system in the country. I will say with all transparency as well, who is a dear and close friend, more like a brother to me. So I'm very excited to know that this is in the future and someone that Mayor-elect Eric Adams can depend on to do the kind of transformational work that he has talked about on the campaign trail, about all of the different areas that really need a real overhaul, a fixing. And there's going to be a lot of, I'm sure, resistance to change, a lot of controversial conversations around how best to do it. But here's the bottom line. The amount of money that's been spent and that is spent in this New York City school system, and to see how poorly our children are performing, there is a problem. It's been on fire for years. There have been Band-Aids that have put on certain situations. And if they do what they've talked about doing, and I have every confidence that with the right support systems and leadership, they can really create history with an overhaul of the largest school system and to really have children performing at a capacity where they're able to perform. Every child has the same opportunities to learn and grow would be a refreshing thought and idea in New York City, because I've seen personally what happens when resources are not given equitably across the entire city of New York. And you're talking billions of dollars. This is not just a small couple thousand, a couple million. This is a significant portion of the budget that is around education. And if we have so many failing schools, so many children being touched by the criminal justice system, there is so much to be discussed. And the UFT, I'm hoping, will also be at the table with their concerns, but be open to what needs to be done for teachers to really have the kind of compassion in addition to the structural changes that need to be made, because not everybody, unfortunately, is in the teaching profession because they love children. And I'll just say it, I know it's not something that people want to hear, but I've seen it. And when you teach from the heart, when you really believe in every child, you treat them differently, you understand different learning styles. There's so many levels to how our talk has to match up with the action in every classroom across New York City. So public school, parochial school, charter school, whatever school where children attend, I'm really hoping that the very ambitious agenda that the mayor-elect has put out is being able to be supported and fulfilled by who is being tapped to be the next chancellor of New York City.
Well, when I heard about this impending appointment, just for the audience, if they aren't aware, David Banks is the founder of a network of charter schools called.
It's not charter schools. It's not charter schools. They are public schools.
But did they start out as charter schools?
They did not start out as that. That is one of the fallacies that people have about Eagle Academy Foundation. It is not a charter school, has never been a charter school. It was the first public school that brought back an all-boy public school.
Oh, okay.
And it is all the 6 schools under the Eagle Academy Foundation are public high schools. People thought they were charter because of the very close interaction of the foundation that raised funds to support extracurricular activities and access for the children. But it is not a charter school. I'm passionately saying it because Eagle has been one of my clients, and yes, David has been my friend. I've worked in the foundation doing work for family engagement, et cetera. And it was amazing to see that there was no cherry picking. This was regular public school in the 5 areas that were touted in a study as to where the prison pipeline was being funneled. And the areas that were on this list that was in the study are where the Eagle Academy schools exist. And Newark was added on. So it was strategically created as public schools within areas where Black and brown children were not getting the same access as other schools. So they've operated within the Board of Ed, and they've had the additional support of the foundation in extending these young Black and brown boys of color opportunities in education.
And just to be clear, when I was head of youth diversion at the Brooklyn DA's office, we had a program directly with the young men of Eagle Academy in Brooklyn. So, and I've attended the graduations. I've gone to the school. They do a wonderful job with these young men. No question, no doubt. The reason why, though, I felt that there might be some pushback from the UFT is because traditionally they've been opposed to any sort of, private foundational support coming into the otherwise public school system. I just hope that everybody just puts down their swords and thinks about the children and is in favor of the changes that are necessary to create a better product out of the public school system and to remove the overwhelming level of segregation that exists in this system, the slanting towards some students and not others. All this has to end in the largest public school system in the country, and I really hope and that David Banks is going to be able to pull it off, and I almost have no doubt he will if he gets the support. And like I said, if people surrender their agendas and just think about the children and say, okay, right, let's think about these kids, because even on the if we extend it over to the charter school side, I see some charter schools that aren't performing either, because things are not perfect in that land either. On both sides. I just hope that people start really, really thinking about the children. I know that he's going to be confronting this new issue that's coming up with the gifted and talented school and the changes that are going on with that, because those schools are traditionally overwhelmingly white and Asian, even though the majority of students in the city are students of color. And somebody has to do something about that. There's no reason why schools that are where you have like this exclusive group that gets the benefit of receiving some of the best education in the country, in terms of those for the I think the five schools, the Stuyvesant and the Brooklyn Techs and so forth. And so for there to be so few students of colors at those schools speaks to something being broken in the system. And I hope David proposes a solution to that creates more inclusivity and diversity.
Look, he has a lot to chew on.
Oh yeah.
I'm looking at the title champion disadvantage, and what immediately comes to my mind are the students. Mm-hmm. But once again, I always say, read and think about what is not there. Champion the disadvantage. Here's another disadvantage, and this is another champion that he's going to have to kind of push along, is that people of color are not on the business side of the schools. They're not involved in procurement. They're not involved in getting contracts, whether it's dealing with arbitration of what teacher stays and what teachers go, and any employment issues that the Board of Ed might be facing. They're not involved in the business of schooling. And when you have people of color involved in the business of schooling, you have championed the disadvantage, because there are people out here that own their own printing company that are people of color, brown and black, that own their own books, whatever it may be, and they can't get in the computer applications. They can't get in the front door. They can't be a vendor. They can't circulate like others can circulate throughout the school system, which is a problem for those who are trying to do so, and they are the disadvantage, just on the business level, on the professional level, in another area. So we can talk about the end result, the kids and what that looks like, and all the things that you guys mentioned. That is what we call front facing. Like we look immediately to that, but that whole back office, somebody said, somebody said one time to me when I was talking about David Banks becoming the chancellor, and we were just talking about procurement and just getting in the pipeline in a very soft conversation. The person said, you can change the head of the snake, however, the neck controls. So there's a lot of things that he's going to be able to do. There's a lot of things he's going to say he's going to get done. But the neck is that business part. It's like the restaurant. It's like the back part of the office. If that back part of that restaurant is not rocking, I don't care how good the food tastes, the restaurant is not going to be around for long. And the good news, and this is not a threat. This is something that speaks to what Ed was saying. UFT not really liking private foundation. You need someone that comes from the private, that has a taste of the private, that knows the business, it has the business acumen, that, everybody who goes to Cornell or goes to Wharton School of Business or go to NYU doesn't always have to work for a firm. They can work for a non-for-profit. They can work for the city, and they can bring that knowledge. That's how you that's how you prevent there being a weakest link, right? Because the talent is spread throughout agencies in a variety of places, and you go and you make it strong.
Well, the good news.
Just to be clear, though, a few years ago, I did have an issue with, I believe it was Chancellor Klein being appointed, who was a gentleman who had zero experience with education running the school system.
I hear that, but that's not dangerous.
And I've been one to say that, the business people are smart, but they're not always the smartest people in the room. All I'm looking for here is some balance.
Absolutely. So let's close out the show with this thought, right? That you need that balance to have experience across a variety of backgrounds, but be very clear that David Banks also understands the business.
Right.
He understands, the bottleneck and the percentages of let's say MWBEs being able to participate in sizable ways that
That's
they
right.
support the Board of Ed. So it's going to be, trust and believe that it'll be a new day in New York, him given the green light once things move forward, because his heart is for the children and he
Yeah.
understands everything that impacts the children, including the business.
And now,
Including,
Dr. Grant, but you got to come right now. We ain't saying, you know what I mean? Like, folks got to come right. Like, you
oh,
got to
absolutely.
have your game on. I just want to make sure, oh, just because blackface in position, don't, you got to have your game on. And like Ed, I understand, you know, if you're too one-sided on the business, you may not understand that. This brother's well balanced. Not that you're saying that he's not, but this brother's well balanced. And we just need to all be in that room. Like folks need to, because we haven't been in that room. You need to be in that room. And that room,
Exactly.
a lot of things go down in that room. A lot of things.
Exactly.
Just like the golf course.
Yeah, just like the.
And look, you laughing. You and I still out the room. And guess who's in the room in the golf course?
Well, hey, I'm just saying. So the good news is, though, that because of conversations like this and having Speaking Legally, that we can bring it to the forefront. I was very clear and transparent on my thoughts around David, not just because he is like a brother. He really is my brother. By another mother. That's how I would describe him. But I know who he is as a person. Everybody else will be able to make their own judgment by his actions. And he is not afraid to be held accountable. He's not afraid to roll up his sleeves and do the work. Our mayor-elect, Eric Adams, has won because of what he has gone through every community. It wasn't just the Black and brown community. He went to every single community to share a vision for New York City that he is very passionate about. But what we do know is that you can have a great vision if you don't have all the people around you supporting and executing. It makes it difficult to do it. So I would just say, wherever you land on the political spectrum, if you're a resident in New York City, do your best to participate. Bring your voice, even if it's an opposing voice, bring it respectfully so it can be considered if it's in the best interest of how we live as a community, how we take care of our children, how we protect our elders, how we do business and make sure there's equity and access for everyone, and how even the climate control and green economy that we're talking about, those are things, climate change. You know, rest in power to my dear friend Cecil Corbin Mark, who's no longer here. And that was one of the things that he advocated for. We all have a part to play. So don't sit in the critic's seat, rolling up and sitting down like, I don't know what he gonna do or she gonna do. Get involved yourself and lend your thoughts, your ideas. Everyone's voice is valid. Everyone's voice needs to be heard. What will actually be done is by those that we elect in these positions and hold them accountable for the overall good. So what a show we went through. DAs from all across the world into education, and we still have more to follow up on next week to go a little bit deeper in what Ed is going to share with the Brooklyn judge, curbing the defendant's rights on evidence sharing. So, Senor Pichardo, I'm looking forward to you breaking that down with Mr. Russell next week. And once again, to the family of Michael Thomas Sr., as we celebrate his life today, we are holding you in our thoughts and in our prayers. Final words, gentlemen?
Happy holiday season to all. God blessings to you and your families. Take care and see you next week.
I want to say happy belated birthday. Yesterday was my father's birthday. He's passed away. Going on, let me see, it's 2009. Yeah, some
12 years.
12 years now. So happy belated birthday to him. I bring him up, and it's appropriate that I bring him up in this particular show because we're talking about David Banks. And when David Banks was either assistant principal or a teacher at Law and Government, principal, my father participated in the moot court competition that they had there. And they would go there every week. And that's how I was introduced to Brother Banks, because I participated in that. And that was a long time ago, because I left the district attorney's office in 1995, 96. And we ran that program for 4 or 5 years prior to that. So you put them numbers together. I got confidence in my man that he's going to do the do. And is, what's, I'm sorry to be long-winded, but what is so interesting is that you have a mayor who has a police background. You have the chancellor, soon to be chancellor, who comes from a family of a police background. And both of them embrace the intricacies and the difficulties that is presented to them, representing and being part of a community that's Black and brown, and are willing to look at a variety of ways of how to resolve it that may not be conventional, but to our community is well needed. So I hope they don't get knocked off their stride. I hope they're able to bob and weave and stay the course and implement those things, whether it's on the educational level or any other level, to make sure that our communities are safe and we're not taken advantage of. So with that being said, I'll see you guys next week. Same time, same bad channel.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your day. And we'll be back 4 p.m. Eastern next week, Wednesday. Bye-bye.